Rand Water is an extremely old institution. Rand Water is older than South Africa is as an independent sovereign state.
Johannesburg's taps are running dry. What is causing this? Well, joining me to discuss is Professor Anthony Turton. He is with the University of the Free State. Anthony Turton, welcome back to the channel. So in recent days and weeks, Johannesburg and broader Gauteng region has had some pretty severe problems with its water supply. There's been water shedding now, constraints on the usage of water by the city. What has caused this problem?
Yes, these things are always inherently complex where one factor influences another. So what you have now, what I call exacerbating factors, which is the immediate short-term hot spell that we're having, and that has caused a spike in demand as people water their gardens, etc. So that is one factor. And the second factor has been this persistent ongoing blackout or load shedding from Eskom, which without any question of doubt is an exacerbating factor. But the underlying factor is different. The underlying factor is lies really at the institutional level of Rand Water and elsewhere. But let's just quickly focus on the Rand Water institutional problem. 10 years ago, a decision was made within Rand Water to upgrade the Suikerbos water treatment plant. The design was done, the planning was done, and the procurement process was initiated. And it's taken 10 years to get through the treasury hurdles, etc., the procurement, and still no contractors have been appointed. So at least within 10 years, with a decade now, we've had this institutional bottleneck, and that is driven in part by the inherent corruption within the system and attempts by Treasury to stamp out corruption by, if you like, sort of over-controlling. But this is a factor now. So without any question of doubt, if the minister has now recently announced that Rand Water can pump more water, and that's a good idea, it's a wonderful idea, but they still are constrained by this Suikerbos treatment plant. They can't get the water through the plant fast enough. So this is just one of many examples. There are other examples as well within the city of Johannesburg. But I just remind you when I end this answer, I'll just remind you that Rand Water is an extremely old institution. Rand Water is older than South Africa is as an independent sovereign state. South Africa became an independent state in 1910, and Rand Water was created in 1903 after the Anglo-Boer War ended. And the purpose of Rand Water was to pump water uphill to the gold mining industry to sustain the city of Johannesburg, which didn't really exist at that time, other than a small little tin shanty town and a couple of tents. So the Rand Water is very, very old, very, very deeply embedded in the economy of South Africa. And Johannesburg Water came significantly later. But Johannesburg Water is also a very important part of the value chain because Rand Water is the bulk water provider, but the client that they feed in this case is Johannesburg Water. Johannesburg Water on-sells that product to the end user.
All right, so like so many of the problems that we have experienced in state utilities and network services, a lot of the problems are actually policy and politically related rather than necessarily technical. The technical problems manifest as a result of some of the poor policy frameworks and the governance problems. So in terms of this relationship between Rand Water and Joburg Water, is it fair to say that there's been some kind of breakdown in that relationship? Is that causing some of these problems?
Yes, I think that's an important issue. I'm also a policy person, and if you really want to go into the policy depth about this thing, we need to go back to 1994 when we became a democracy. When in the fervor of the moment, the sheer joy of now transitioning from an armed struggle to a relatively peaceful democracy. A number of important policy decisions were taken, and one of them was the whole problem of land restitution in South Africa. And at that point in time, I was working with Professor Carter Asmal, who was the water minister. So I had a lot of deep conversations with him over this, what I'm going to share with you now. And he told me that the fear that the ANC had was that they needed to engage in land redistribution, but they were concerned about what happened in Zimbabwe. So they chose instead to rather use water as the land redistribution tool. So the National Water Act, published in 1998, was the first democratic legislation, and it was a complete rehash of the original Water Act completely. And what it was, a radical instrument, a political instrument profoundly. And as this radical instrument, it had very far-reaching implications. And one of them was that it separated land rights from water rights, and it basically nationalized the resource. And that was a political move in order to try and control the allocation of water to land, which would then control the price of land or the value of land. But that, of course, backfired because this created a massive bureaucratic burden, because every single user of water now had to get a license. So the bureaucratic overload, the licensing overload, seems to have been an ANC legacy. And if you look no further than your motor car license or your car, the renewal of your car license, or if you happen to own a firearm, if you've got to go for your firearm licenses, these things are never in sync with each other. You have endless queues, and they're sometimes years out of date. So unfortunately, in the case of water, this is the case. So you therefore have a breakdown in the process, the actual the decision-making process. And this law is something that at the end of the day is almost unimplementable, because the bureaucratic constraints are of such a magnitude that if you can't implement it, then you can't really do anything about it. There's one more thing I'd like to say, is that at that point in time, some of the responsibilities that were held by the National Department of Water Affairs were then handed over to municipalities. At the very same time, when municipalities were amalgamating, small, weak municipalities were amalgamating with big, more powerful ones, in the belief that the weak will be strengthened by the strong. But what has actually happened is the other way around, that the strong are being weakened by the weak. And this is, a very important thing. And then, of course, you've got another policy issue that comes into that. And this was the whole policy of cadre deployment. And that policy has been a very aggressive policy. And that has eroded out, let's call it a leadership level. At leadership level, one would think that technically incompetent but politically connected person coming in a leadership position would lean heavily on technically competent people. But what we now find with retrospect is that didn't happen. They tended to view those people as a threat, so therefore they purged them. So we've had a purging at that top senior level of people over time that have simply left the civil service and gone elsewhere. So these are all exacerbating factors, and these are all, I would call them structural issues, structural policy-related institutional issues that are manifesting now with a vengeance.
All right, so there's the policy considerations, and now we see this new ANC government coming in and to the city of Joburg. Do you think that this is going to create even more churn, lack of accountability, and deepening of some of these systemic problems?
Well, I can't see that it can't, because you don't have a stable municipal management. You don't have a stable leadership. And in fact, for the proxy there, we can just look at Nelson Mandela Bay. Well, Nelson Mandela Bay is deep in crisis right now, absolutely deep in crisis. And because of infighting at political leadership level, at municipal leadership level, they didn't acknowledge that they have a crisis. And in fact, they actively rejected attempts made by national government, Treasury, and Department of Water and Sanitation. They actively rejected it. So you've got a leadership at municipal level that has just got no vision for what is best for the people. They are so engrossed in their own personal self-enrichment that they're unable to see the forest for the trees. And this, unfortunately, is where we are today. So we're moving into an era of coalition government. It's likely to accelerate now, because I think the ANC is probably getting weakened by this. And the next general election, I did an interview last night where the point came up that, what about the next general election? And I think we might well see that the ANC loses its majority at the next general election. So the assumption is that the ANC will remain in power. I think that's a flawed assumption. But that also tells me that we're likely to move into a bigger coalition era. And we've seen now that coalition politics is fraught. And if you've got this fragile alliance that literally one vote in a meeting can change the outcome, in fact get the mayor to be fired, well, that cannot bode well for institutional stability and the continuity of your decision making in times of crisis.
Anthony Turton, thank you very much. Let's hand over to you, our audience. Are you living in Gauteng? Have you been affected by the recent water cuts? Leave your comments down below. Also, if you enjoyed this discussion with Anthony Turton, you might want to check out my earlier interview with him. That's linked over here. Don't forget to give this video a like. My name is David Ansara. This is the CRA. Until next time, take care.